This is Radio 4 FM. If you'd like to hear our 30-minute theatre, The Sleeper, you should retune now to Radio 4 Longwave. Here on FM, between now and 4 o'clock, we'll be covering some of this afternoon's events in Parliament, including Prime Minister's Question Time. At the House of Commons is our parliamentary correspondent, Michael Fairbairn.
Good afternoon and welcome once again to the House of Commons for a little under an hour of live coverage. MPs have just returned to Westminster after their Easter recess, a longer holiday than usual, just over 2 weeks, and they are in fine voice. During the time they've been away, the focus of world attention, of course, has been on the Kurdish refugees in northern Iraq who are trying to escape Saddam Hussein's persecution. Yesterday, in a statement on the first day back, the Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd appeared to rule out military force to protect them, in apparent contradiction of what the Prime Minister, John Major, said in a television interview on Sunday. Though Mr. Hurd did say that the United Nations would not tolerate any harassment of the relief effort. There'll almost certainly be questions to Mr. Major on that this afternoon.
That's why we recently launched a major initiative to draw attention to those who are entitled to free tests.
Mr. Robin Cook.
From Labour's front bench.
Hasn't the Minister seen the survey carried out last week by The Economist, which found that in the 2 years since charges were introduced, 5 million fewer eye tests have taken place than were carried out in the 2 years before charges were introduced? Doesn't she grasp that if only 1% of those 5 million go on to develop serious disorders of the eye, it will cost her far more than she's saving through charging for the eye test? And if she's in any real doubt about the figures, why has she and her colleagues never once approached the optometrist to agree on how they can measure the dramatic drop in eye tests which are a direct result of their policies?
Mr. Speaker, our consumer survey, like that organised by the RNIB and the Consumers Association, all made clear that demand for eyesight tests has returned to the existing trends through the 80s, which were established before the announcement about the introduction of charges. Those who are able to do so can rightly pay the modest charge for a sight test, amounting to something like a packet of polos each week.
Robert Hicks, number 13.
This is a question about health services in the southwest.
All district health authorities are now funded to purchase health care for their resident population. Arrangements for the operational management of health care facilities other than NHS trusts are a local matter.
Hicks.
Conservative.
Speaker, now that it is confirmed that Cornwall will be responsible for the funding of health care in the overlap area, will he provide the assurance that decisions will be made very quickly about the management of the cottage hospitals and other functions at present provided by Plymouth, and that the decision will not form part of any deal in the context of the reorganisation of health authorities in Devon?
Stephen Dole.
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly confirm that this is a completely separate matter from any possible reorganisation of health authorities in Devon. There is, I think, benefit in proceeding reasonably quickly to a conclusion, as my honourable friend says, motivated, of course, by the principal recognition that under the reformed NHS, the key thing is the responsibility which rests on the Cornwall Health Authority to secure the best health care available for the people of Cornwall from the resources spent by the NHS in the county.
And so straight on to the first question to Mr. Major of the new parliamentary term. Big cheer from Conservatives as Mr. Major steps up to the dispatch box.
I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today.
Sir Anthony Durant.
Conservative.
I congratulate my right honourable friend.
I think the cheer is for Sir Anthony, who was recently knighted.
Four-point initiative in dealing with the Kurds and the Shiites, particularly the safe haven proposals, which I think are very important and are now being accepted. Will he also work hard with the agencies to improve the aid to the Shiites and Kurds? And will he also push the United Nations to implement 678 and 688 in order that the Kurds and Shiites have confidence, in order they can go back to their towns and villages, and then we will stop this appalling situation? I am grateful to my honourable friend. Hundreds of tons of aid have already been delivered
of which 220 tons have come from the United Kingdom. In addition to the three C-130s already there, we now have a total of 9 Chinook helicopters operating from Turkey that will be fully operational by the end of this week. The 2 special representatives of the Secretary-General are now in Iraq, and by the end of this week there will be 150 United Nations personnel in Iraq to oversee the relief effort. Urgent and intensive international discussions are continuing over our safe havens plan, which I and others believe is the only way forward. Indeed, I believe it is something that is rapidly gaining ground. Later today, I shall chair a further meeting of ministers to take stock of aid needs.
Mr. Bill Kinnock.
Yes, the Labour leader.
Mr. Speaker, may I strongly support the Prime Minister on the efforts being made to get aid to the wretched people who are fleeing from Saddam Hussein's forces. As the agonies of the Kurdish people continue, can the Right Honourable Gentleman tell me whether he shares my view that the atrocities committed by Saddam Hussein against the Kurdish people mean that the Iraqi dictator has a case to answer under Articles 2 and 3 of the Genocide Convention of 1948? Will the Prime Minister now refer the issue of genocide to the United Nations Security Council as a matter of urgency?
I am grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his first words. I have already asked for legal advice on the subject of genocide.
Mr. Order.
Shout from Labour MP Dithera.
Order.
The Speaker's on his feet, appealing for calm. Here's Teddy Taylor, Conservative.
Teddy Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, as the strict budgetary controls of agricultural spending were effectively blown sky high last Monday when the Council of Ministers voted by 10 votes to 2 to go through the ceiling, could the Prime Minister say what on earth we can do, or is agriculture entirely out of control? In congratulating him on Britain being one of the 2 who voted against it, can he say to the consumers and taxpayers of Britain if there is any action of any sort we can now take to hold on to these strict budgetary controls, which we fought for so hard?
I share with my honourable friend the importance of keeping very strict budgetary control, both on agriculture and on other items of the European Community budget. This is a position we have consistently stuck to, and we will continue to argue that in the Agriculture Council and in the other councils of the community.
Ashdown.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Notwithstanding the Prime Minister's welcome but long-term plans for Kurdish sanctuary in Iraq, is it not the case that our present air superiority provides the means, and UN Resolution 688 provides the authority for action now to prevent continuing genocide against the Kurds in Iraq? Is it not the case that the only thing that is lacking for action is political will and international leadership? Why is it that he still seems reluctant to provide either of these?
As the Right Honourable Gentleman is aware, the only comprehensive international plan before the international community is the one that I announced to the European community on Monday of this week. And as I said to the House just a few moments ago, urgent and intensive international discussions are continuing at this moment on that plan.
Mr. Churchill.
In congratulating my right honourable friend on his safe haven policies, will he build on those as soon as possible with our colleagues and partners in the Security Council to ensure that under UN auspices, forces are sent in both to the north and south of Iraq to establish safe havens at the earliest possible opportunity where Saddam Hussein's armies will not be permitted to go?
I have made it clear to our colleagues in the United Nations and elsewhere that if the relief effort is harassed or frustrated, that in my judgment, under Security Council Resolution 688, it is clearly the responsibility of the United Nations to protect both helpers and helped. If necessary, the UN would have to act upon that responsibility and seek whatever assistance, including military assistance, that it might need from its members.
Jimmy Ray!
So we move on to the next question. Also an open question from Jimmy Ray, Labour MP. We heard a moment ago from Glasgow.
No doubt that the question on everybody's lips is this disgraceful programme, Panorama, that made allegations that the Prime Minister used an address in Templar Street in Lambeth in order to gain, use it as an accommodation address, in order to gain access to the electoral register and a seat in the Lambeth Council. When he stayed at Binney Street in Westminster, could you give an assurance that this statement is untrue and what action is he about to take?
This is a reference to last night's Panorama programme on BBC One.
I can say to the honourable gentleman that the qualification for standing for Lambeth Council was to be resident within the area, and Panorama were told on more than one occasion by the lady whose address they gave that I was in fact living in the area directly opposite her at the time, and that fully meets the qualification, I cannot explain to the honourable gentleman why Panorama chose not to broadcast that fact.
Question number 3 now, John Bowis.
Number 3, order.
Bit of hubbub waiting to subside. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to be concentrating. Here he is at the dispatch box.
The answer I gave some
John Bowis, Conservative from Battersea.
Does my right honourable friend agree that the success of his policies in bringing down inflation and interest rates and mortgage rates shows that the better way for Britain is the Conservative way to opportunity? And that it is getting better and better as the months go by? Does he agree that that could just be why there is such a face of disappointment on the benches opposite and such desperate calls for an early election?
My honourable friend is quite right. It is precisely because we were prepared to take tough action on inflation that it's now coming down fast, and as I forecast, interest rates have been following it down. The economy will continue to improve in the months ahead, and we will continue to extend opportunity by spreading wealth, ownership and choice, and no other party in this country can offer that to the British people.
Peter Pike!
Number 4.
Question number 4 from Labour MP Peter Pike from Burnley.
Pike!
Is the Prime Minister not concerned about the many thousands of struggling pensioners that get a pension increase and immediately lose income support and other transitional arrangements? And is it not time we ended the practice of giving with one hand and immediately taking back with the other hand and started to give all our pensioners a fair deal?
If that were to be the policy of the opposition, then any pretence they might have at public expenditure control would have gone.
John Greenway!
Mr. Speaker,
John Greenway, Conservative.
I agree that the next decade will be a decade of opportunity for young people, but that one opportunity which this House and the whole country would rather they did not take was the opportunity to commit crime. Would he agree with me that in this National Crime Prevention Week, the one major objective we should seek is for young people to be deterred from committing criminal crimes?
I would certainly agree with my honourable friend, and my honourable friend will have noticed in particular the initiatives on truancy taken this week.
Terry Patchett!
Number 5, sir.
Next question, Terry Patchett, another Labour MP, this time from Barnsley. Terry Patchett.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister feel comfortable with his own policies, given the criticism from within his own party, both inside and outside this House, or is he merely a victim of an enemy within?
I can say to the honourable gentleman that what he will find is that there are millions and millions of people outside this House who support our policies and will vote for them.
Mr. Maxwell Hislop.
Robin Maxwell Hislop, Conservative.
Friend, make an important and clear statement today that the British government's policy in support of the safety and security of Iraqi Kurds in Iraq is not support for Kurdish insurrection against successive governments of Iraq, Syria, Turkey and Iran to form a separate state, and that activity of that kind gives a spurious cloak to the present government of Iraq to take military action of a genocidal kind against Iraqi Kurds in Iraq.
I have made it clear. I have made it clear in this House on previous occasions that our concern in Iraq at present is to ensure that the Kurds are well treated, safe and protected from repression. That remains our policy.
And this is a question about Turkey's partial occupation of Cyprus.
I met the Turkish Prime Minister yesterday and the President of Cyprus last week. My discussion yesterday with the Turkish Prime Minister concentrated on the plight of the Kurds. I urged him to help the international efforts to get the Kurds down from the mountains into areas of Turkey and Iraq where they can receive food and medicine. The Turkish Prime Minister and I spoke briefly about Cyprus later in the day.
Perhaps the Prime Minister could tell us what discussions he had with the Prime Minister of Turkey, because he must be aware that the British government is a guarantor of Cypriot independence, and that the 1974 invasion of Cyprus by Turkey was condemned by the United Nations. And does he not think that the aim ought to be the withdrawal of foreign troops from Cyprus and the reunification of the island with guarantees for all communities on that island to end the terrible time that's been had by so many people through the division of that island by military intervention?
I made it entirely clear to the Turkish Prime Minister that we supported the efforts being made by the Secretary General, and we hoped that he would make progress towards a satisfactory solution speedily.
The Prime Minister
Conservative.
Cyprus, a democratic member of the Commonwealth, is the only European country at present forcibly occupied by a foreign power. And would he also agree that positive action now is necessary to persuade Turkey that it is in its own interests and in the interests of the regional stability of the Eastern Mediterranean that the reunification of Cyprus as a stable and democratic country is implemented as soon as possible?
I agree with my honourable friend, and the Turkish government are aware that that is our policy.
Robert Waring!
The next question returns to the open question.
I gave some moments ago.
Engagements. Robert Waring, Labour.
Is the Prime Minister aware that the answer that he gave to my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition this afternoon, will have appalled the entire nation? That in fact, if a Prime Minister above anyone has not yet taken legal advice about the Genocide Convention, when Kurds are being murdered and tortured every day, it's an absolute disgrace, that it's a sin, in fact, that this matter has been allowed to go as far as it has done. Will he not, in fact, take action this day to instruct our representatives at the United Nations to raise the whole matter of genocide, so that action, even military action, should be taken against the butcher of Baghdad?
Well, I note the honourable gentleman's remarks with some care. I think it is wise to seek and await proper legal advice on these matters. And I think if the matter is so self-evident, why then did the Right Honourable Gentleman himself not raise it till yesterday? And where has the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, been for the last fortnight?
So, Prime Minister's question time ends in rather a lot of noise. And as it does so, the winner of the Neath by-election, Peter Hain, Labour MP, new Labour MP, is going to take the oath as the new MP. Peter Hain, 41 years old, came to prominence 20 years ago as a young Liberal when he was an anti-apartheid campaigner. He won the Neath by-election with a majority of about 9,000 votes after the death of Donald Coleman. This is him taking the vote, the oath.
And bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors according to law.
Thanks. Now we sign the roll. I just put this away.
Rather a lot of noise in the background, which I think is a reflection of MPs having just had 2 weeks off and perhaps not very much to talk about. what happens when they're signing the roll. They tend to lower the microphone so you can't hear the background noise. Quite a lot of MPs are now leaving the chamber. Just signing the roll now. The clerk is showing him where to sign, blotting it with a large piece of blotting paper, and now Peter Hain walks up to shake the Speaker's hand. Cries of halved majority from Conservative MPs.
I have a point of order.
Now here's the Speaker.
Jack Straw.
Jack Straw is Labour's education spokesman.
Order, of which I've given notice to you, the Leader of the House, and to the Secretary of State for Education and Science. And it relates to the conduct of ministers in relation to the School Teachers' Pay and Conditions Bill. Mr. Speaker, the second reading of that bill took place in this House on the 27th of November. It went into Standing Committee before Christmas and came out of Standing Committee on the 5th of February, 2.5 months ago. On the second reading of the bill, on the 27th of November, the Secretary of State for Education told the House, and I quote, that the bill contains the agreed policy of this government. And he indicated that 2 of the candidates for the Conservative leadership were committed to the bill, including the successful candidate, now the Prime Minister. Upstairs in committee, Mr. Speaker, ministers pressed for an early conclusion to the committee stage, telling us repeatedly that they had to have the bill enacted on the statute book by Easter. Since the committee stage, however, Mr. Speaker, instead of coming to this House for its report stage, the bill has disappeared into that black hole of indecision, which now passes for Cabinet government, amidst repeated press leaks that, despite the fact that the bill was referred to as containing the agreed position of the government and the personal commitment of the Prime Minister, the whole policy of the government to what... I'll come to that in 1 second.
This is a matter of dispute with the government.
Mr. Speaker, the point of order which I have to explain to you is this. It's about the conduct of ministers in explaining away the delay.